One time I went to this New York comedy club 2 years ago. And you know how some comedians will point out and ask you something? And one of the topics that I almost said therapist, one of the comedians says, anyone do therapy? And I was like, yeah, me. I like raised my hand. I was very, very prideful, right? Because I love therapy.
Yeah.
And they want to make jokes. That's their whole job. And I love jokes. I don't get offended by anything. But this really did hit a chord. He said, okay, cool. How long have you been going for? And I said, 5 years. And he said, so it's not working, huh? And you know me, I'm like trying to laugh and I'm like, ha ha, on the inside, I'm like, oh, yeah, let me think about that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Therapy Thursday podcast, where every single Thursday I learn lessons from my own therapy sessions and I share them with all of you. Hi, Dani.
Hi, Kelly.
I cannot believe we're actually doing a podcast.
This is like 6 months in the making now.
I know, and it's the week of my birthday. I am turning 28. What? And it's only a week after finally hitting 1 year of weed sobriety.
Isn't it fun how all of these things have coincided at the same time?
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie, everyone, I really did strategize this in a way where it would give me the momentum to do something that I've been terrified of doing. And the reason why I'm doing the Therapy Thursday podcast is because for the last 2 to 3 years, I've been doing this little series on Instagram and YouTube that's called Therapy Thursday because I have learned and gained so much help, healing, insight from going to therapy for the last 6 years. And something I think I get really self-conscious about, though, is, well, you've been going to therapy for 6 years. Why are you still going?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you're not alone. I feel like many people probably experience that through their therapy journeys.
Yes. And every time I talk about therapy or think about therapy, one time I went to this New York comedy club 2 years ago. And you know how some comedians will point out and ask you something? And one of the topics that I almost said therapist, one of the comedians says, anyone do therapy? And I was like, yeah, me. I like raised my hand. I was very, very prideful, right? Because I love therapy.
Yeah.
And they want to make jokes. That's their whole job. And I love jokes. I don't get offended by anything. But this really did hit a chord. He said, okay, cool. How long have you been going for? And I said, 5 years. And he said, so it's not working, huh? And you know me, I'm like trying to laugh and I'm like, ha ha, on the inside, I'm like, oh, yeah, let me think about that. But that's what I wanted to talk about today, everyone, because therapy has such confusion around it, but there's also so much curiosity. And I love sharing every single bite that I get from every session because I never know how much more digging there is to do. And it doesn't have to be invasive. It doesn't have to be scary. It can also just be someone as a sounding board for your feelings and thoughts. And that is what we are talking about today. Why I am still in therapy after 6 years. So the first segment of our podcast is called Oh, Please. Now, this is the part of the show where we share something that makes us go, oh, please. Or it could be something cool, something you want in your life. You're like, oh, please. But mainly, I think Dani and I have a lot of ughs.
Probably more of those.
Yeah. I don't know why I even say that there's like, oh, please, like the nice version. I think that's me just trying to cover my ass. But my big oh, please is when someone says to me, they have gone to therapy, which I so admire. I'm like, that's so cool. But then they immediately follow up with saying, yeah, and I've gotten everything I've gotten out of it, and I don't need to go anymore. I have all the tools. I'm good. And I'm like, it's not that I disagree. I do think it's good to learn and get tools, but how have you mastered the entirety of self-reflection, self-insight? And I think I get really annoyed because it kind of makes me think, should I not be going? But I have so many gems every single time I go, even if I had nothing on my mind before I went to the session. And I really just go, oh, please, like, does that make you feel better? It almost feels like overcompensating a lot.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder too, a lot of people will say it makes them feel weak to even start going. So I feel like after they stop going, they're like, oh, okay, I can tell everyone I'm strong now.
Right. I think it's important to remember that, everybody has different phases in their life. So for some people, maybe there's the financial barrier and they feel embarrassed to admit that they can't prioritize therapy financially. I think there's a huge proportion of people who still believe that therapy is only for broken people.
Ugh,
So for them, they want to admit that they're fixed. And by stopping therapy, that kind of signifies or like signals to their friends or their family that I've done the work and I'm complete now.
I
Right?
know. And I feel like the way that I try to prove that is obviously with Therapy Thursday. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm at least learning. See, I'm growing. And luckily, I've been able to now create it in a way where it really is just sharing. But I'm sure a huge part of when I was doing it, at some point, it started turning into I hope people know that I'm learning something instead of just broken, which is a
Right.
total normal thing to feel so insecure. And there have been a lot of points in my life where I probably the only statement you would ever say to me if we hung out was, "You know what my therapist said the other day?" But what's your oh please for today, Danny?
Oh, so mine is definitely a self reflection of my own judgment of therapy and how I have been the person that has judged other people for going to therapy. So I'll use the example of
Mm.
couples therapy. I can think of particular instances where I had heard a couple was starting couples therapy, and I was like, they are never going to last if they're starting couples therapy. Like, the
Oh my
stigma
god.
associated with that. So I think my oh, please is at myself of just my ignorance and the way that I've been able to compartmentalize therapy again as something that is like your last resort, that is really when you're in a state of complete brokenness, particularly with relationship therapy, instead of thinking of it as something that almost every couple could probably use anyways. But kudos to those who can acknowledge the brokenness or the damage in their relationship to be able to
Yeah.
go and start fixing it. So my oh please is at myself and to anybody else who still thinks that way, because come on, like if we're not acknowledging that there's so much more to therapy than just putting a band-aid on something, like how far have we really come?
Oh, yes. And we are going to talk about all the different types of therapy I've done. And luckily for you, Danny, I can tell you what couples therapy is really like.
I
I'm
love that.
I'm only 28, but I went to couples therapy when I was 24. But let's start from the beginning, okay?
Yeah,
So,
I want to
what
know what kind of therapy you've done, because I know you've talked about couples therapy. You obviously talk
yeah.
about the therapy that you're doing right now with your therapist, but I feel like you have a long list of different types of therapy that you've experienced. So let's go through them. I want you to tell me all about every single type
Yeah.
of therapy you've gone through.
Yeah, well, okay, I started when I was 17. I went to my college's counseling center because I didn't have the finances or the understanding of what it was. And I just really Googled it and I was like, oh, it's free to go to the counseling center at my college. I'll go check it out. And I really only went because I was depressed and I had binge eating and frankly just wanted to fix the binge eating. That's kind of always how therapy starts is you see something that's like a problem and then you figure out, oh, I want to fix it. I want to change it. Let's go in for that. And soon I realized, oh, there's so many other people who struggle with binge eating like me. And the counseling
Mhm.
center was very cool because they placed me in a little uh, eating struggles group with a couple other college students. And these people were so open and transparent about their struggles. I hated it because I had never done it before.
Right, that was your first experience with therapy. So, and you had probably been hiding a lot of these habits for a
Ugh.
long time. So you were like, I'm supposed to actually talk about this in public with people that go to school with me.
Yeah, and I almost felt protective of them because I just had always hidden. So I was like, "Wait, why are you saying that? They can't know that." And it was really
Mm,
helpful. But the struggle of going to the counseling center was it was only 3 free sessions with one of the therapists there, and then they so
okay.
kindly pair you up with one in the actual area. And I was like, "Oh man, like I don't really have the money for that." But luckily I did have insurance, but we all know, okay, insurance doesn't pay for stuff. It helps
No.
you like access something.
Right. I even, as an adult now, I have looked at our insurance coverage, and it covers like 2 sessions of therapy.
Yeah. It's really difficult, and that's one of the reasons why I love talking about therapy so much, and I will share all the types I've done because there have been a lot of times where I couldn't afford it. So I'm going to tell you all the other options I did because I didn't want to just totally fall off with all my struggles and myself. So anyway, I got paired up with a therapist who was in the area and I really needed it. I mean, I was borderline agoraphobic. So agoraphobia is a fear of like going outside, being social, really leaving your home and your safe space. That's actually a very common thing that people who struggle with anything, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, you become so secluded and your
Mm,
mind feels like you can't do anything, see anyone because it's too much effort. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to therapy. And it just blew my mind up. I mean, she had opened up all these pockets of my brain and my heart that had never even been asked about.
mm,
I realized that there's so many deeper roots of my struggles, and I didn't continue going to that eating disorder group because it was almost too much talk about the eating struggles when my therapist started telling me there's so much more here, and I was like, great.
yeah. Yeah, you were being exposed to other areas of your life that were contributing to the eating
Mhm.
disorder that, you know, you now had the understanding that you could work through those things. It wasn't isolated incidents, right?
No, and that's so hard to accept. That's why a lot of people don't want to go to therapy anymore because as you start digging and you realize a lot more, there is a threshold you have to hit before it starts helping. So a lot of it is scary, a lot of it is hurting, a lot of it feels intimidating and exposing, but those are the things that you want to see and feel so you can get on the other side of using those as gems for you to navigate your way through life. And during that time, actually, the person who encouraged me to go to therapy most was this ex boyfriend of mine. You know, I was intensely codependent, very much struggling with every fiber of my mental health being. And so
Hmm.
was he. So it was a perfect match. And so many of us have those relationships. We're all people. We struggle and we really latch on to relationships like that. And he did really care about me. And he had actually gone to therapy and his family was into it. And I was like, okay, great, I'll go. But he's the person I end up going to couples counseling with everyone. 5 years later, five into the relationship after probably 3,000 breakups.
Wow.
I know there's people out there who have done that. You can't let go of this person, but you can't be with them. There's just no way.
So what led you to couples therapy? Was it literally like we are breaking up so much and our relationship is so toxic that this is our last resort?
Oh no, that wasn't the problem.
Okay.
That didn't bother me at all. What really happened was after several instances of cheating, then lying about it, I find out about it. We try to work through it. You know, I used to be a very blindly loyal person, but that's really just a symptom of being codependent. I don't really think that those are separate. When someone is being super manipulative and crying with you and like holding you when you're crying about them cheating and then they go and do it, I really lost a lot of myself and I can barely relate to that person. But I like sharing that because a lot of these struggles coincide with the body image struggles, with eating disorders. You don't have a relationship with yourself, you don't trust yourself. So you end up getting in relationships that are going to kind of redo the same kind of dissociative patterns for you.
So, how did couples therapy come up? Was this a suggestion that you had? Was this a suggestion because you said, you know, he was
Mhm.
a person who had actually brought you therapy.
Yeah.
So, obviously, he was comfortable talking about it, which is kind of interesting. Did
Mhm.
he suggest it? Did you suggest it? Was it something that came up through your therapist being like, I really think you guys should
Mm.
do this together?
I do think that I was seeing an individual therapist who maybe had recommended it, but the worst part about dating someone who was very manipulative is that they were like, "Yeah, let's work on it together. Like, I'm super into therapy. Let's go." They would try to manipulate me. They were trying to manipulate the therapist, but I didn't know anything about codependency, toxic relationships, manipulation before this. It's what I'd seen growing up. It's what I only had experienced with dating, so obviously now when you look back, it's blindly obvious. But I
Right.
couldn't see any of it. And it was really just instigated by I was so sick of the confusion that I had, and he didn't have empathy. He truly felt like if I was upset by anything he did, it was my problem. And I think that I thought a therapist could fix that. Nope.
And so, what was couples therapy like?
Oh man. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think that every couple could benefit from just having someone be a an unbiased sounding board for anything. And I hate that I'm bringing up couples therapy only based on cheating, but I think that if well, besides him having a personality disorder that's not changeable, I think if we had gone years before, it would have helped to really see where the other person's coming from. And that's what couples therapy really is the therapist is not on anyone's team, but they're
Right.
also not afraid to stand with a specific point or point of view.
They're literally
And
a referee. So, like, they're
correct.
watching the game happen and they don't care really which team is winning. They just want a fair game to be played.
Correct. And one of the best shows actually is called Couples Therapy, which is on Showtime. Everyone, it's on Amazon Prime. It's so freaking good. It's genuinely like a little documentary. It records people's couples therapy sessions, and I think it's really good insight. So go watch that.
That's interesting.
And
Yeah, I'm going to put that on my
you
list.
yeah, you should. It's so good. It's like the best reality show ever. And there is a couple in the first season that reminds me of exactly what I was going through. And when you watch it, you will know, everyone. You will know which one it is. It was very relieving when I first went because in my mind I thought that this relationship was going to get better, but I loved couples therapy because it just taught me more how to really see someone else's point of view even if I don't agree. Like we do need to see where people are coming from to then decide what we're going to do. That's what the service of couples therapy is for you. It's not to always bridge the gap between you and
Mm.
another. You have to see them for what they are. You have to accept it. And the couples therapist forces you to accept the reality of the relationship.
Yeah, you can't just keep living on with rose colored glasses about what's happening in your relationship. You really have to confront it.
Oh, yeah. I felt like I had LASIK surgery of rose colored glasses. I felt like I had placed those on for myself for 6 years. Pretty
Oh
sure
my
my eyes were
gosh.
bloodshot from the crying and the rose colored glasses.
That is so funny. And so, moving past couples therapy, what came after that for you?
I went hard in the paint with individual therapy because the couples therapist, here's the amazing thing. I will be talking about this in later episodes. So I won't spill the beans on what the couples therapist actually said. So you're just going to have to wait for that. Um, After that, was no longer in that relationship, and I went so deep into individual because I had a lot more inner work than I needed to do. I mean, I had never heard the terms codependency. I'd never heard the terms of personality disorders, narcissism, narcissists, empath. Like all of these words were being thrown at me. And it really actually made me feel super insecure about the fact that I thought I was a therapy head for the last 4 years and I didn't know any of that. And it goes to show you that's why I love all the layers of therapy I've done because you can't stop peeling and it's so helpful. I'm not saying it's easy, but it was painful at times, but thank God I went.
Yeah.
Most of the therapy that I did after that was really, I gotta tell you, you gotta figure out the family stuff a little bit. um, that's a really big key that I know so many of us are learning in our therapy journeys right now.
Yeah, and I think that's something, we dive into a lot in this series is going through the connection between all of the different reasons you went to therapy and how it leads back to some of the family trauma that you didn't really even start to dissect until your 20s.
Oh, totally. And through that journey, most of it was trying to get over a breakup, trying to deal with severe heartbreak, and then um, a lot of it was going back to other stuff, going back to the eating disorder stuff, body image stuff, realizing that I feel very dissociated from my body image, a lot of the reasons why it's easy to stay in relationships that don't work. And then kind of supplementing your life with therapy is you're still afraid. I was still afraid of facing my real self fully. And so I think from that year to even this year, individual therapy is so important because you have to keep your lens on yourself. And
Yeah.
so much of my life, I always looked away. I always focused on other people, or I just avoided myself entirely. And the service of therapy is always like, I have to look in the mirror. Um, One of the things that I want to share too is a lot of us don't have the finances to go. And for about a year of my life, I wasn't going to therapy at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my binge eating was getting pretty severe. Coping mechanisms. It's how I'd been doing it for so long in my life after eating disorders, blah, blah, blah. I just Googled, and I encourage everyone to Google. I found this awakening center in Chicago, and it was only $5 or free if you couldn't afford it to just drop in and sit in group therapy. I love group, and um, I never liked going every time I do it, though. I'd get super anxious. I didn't want to go because I think a big part of it was I didn't want to hear other people's problems. I was like, oh, I'm already drowning in mine. I don't want to hear yours.
Right, right. You didn't want to participate in something that wasn't really focused solely on your own journey.
Yeah, and then you realize too, it helps you feel not just less alone. It expands your world to not think that your entire existence is the biggest tragedy of all time.
So true. We can kind of spiral into our own mess very easily.
Yeah.
And to gain some perspective, I mean, every problem is a big problem to us, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the reality is there are so many other people simultaneously experiencing similar things, worse
Mhm.
things, easier things. It's all a journey, right?
Oh yeah. And then my individual therapy with the therapist been seeing now for 6 years, she suggested that I join a trauma support group. And I was like, "What?" And I didn't love that because it affirms how much trauma I had actually been through with a very scary, narcissistically abusive relationship, kind of seeing that a lot growing up. The word trauma I've always despised. It actually still bothers me just because it in your right?
It
It does.
does. We've had conversations about using that word, and you are so averse to it. Like, I almost have to talk, I have to be like, no, Kelly, like, this actually is trauma. And you're like, no, that's a word that just puts people off.
Yeah, and it puts me off.
Yeah.
I I grew up always wanting to diminish everything's like importance or drama, trauma. So having my therapist say, "You've been through so much trauma in your life," I just go, "Really? Me compared to all these other people dealing with worse stuff?" But that's what we forget too. It really is your reality of you have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences. You might not know it. And this group was so tough for me. I mean, I I remember being so afraid of crying in it, and I wanted to cry so much because it opened up so much. The trauma support group was so cool because it was so deep, and we each session there were about 6 to 8 weeks of it, and we would start with like this little pamphlet of like a topic we'd go through, and anytime we would talk about how uh, it started in our childhood, and some of the words were saying, the way you were spoken to, the way that you felt when you were growing up, the way you looked around and you were very wary, and then you just see all these connections between you and then the relationships you have, and it freaks you out.
Yeah.
And I started crying one time, and I was hyperventilating because I was trying not to cry.
Right.
My biggest problem is that's why my therapist told me later on. She said that's why I wanted you to go. I think that you don't understand how to receive support, especially with what I do online. She said I wanted you to be a participant and not a helper, and that's why I wanted you in there.
That's really interesting because when you talk about the online piece, and I love that your therapist brought that up, is you don't really have to experience the support in person. Like when people DM you or they send you an email or whatever, like you have this disassociation with whatever they're saying because you
Huge.
can just read it and be like, thanks so much and move on, right? Like it's just through your phone. But when you're sitting in a group of people that you can feel their compassion, you can feel their empathy, you have to be so vulnerable in that moment. I mean, that is for anybody that's difficult, but I think especially for you, that's like another level.
I had to try so hard to stop affirming people every 5 seconds in the group. So much head nodding from me, so much smiling, so much, oh, I hear you. Oh, so brave for saying, because I genuinely do feel that, but that's also a problem. When you are so focused on boosting others, because you actually do love that, I also really had to see that that was something that I thought was my role growing up. That's
Right.
something that in my head I believe makes me happy and fulfills me, but I am empty inside. And
Yeah.
so every week I really tried to just sit there and share without also making it palatable.
Yes. Yes. Without
And
concocting a story for people to consume, right? And just sharing your
mhm,
trauma, really.
yeah.
Hmm.
And one thing I didn't realize too was how much of that is symptoms of being codependent. And I know if you're listening to this, it's like, oh, there's so many labels, trauma, codependency, eating disorders. It's just a way for me to know what's gone on in my life. I think a lot of us are afraid of discovering the layers and the connections because I a lot will reflect and be like, I've had so much wrong with me. And it's like, no, it's just the way you've navigated life.
And those labels don't necessarily stick or exist forever, but it is
No.
helpful to have an idea of what you're experiencing and what you need to work through. And things are more complicated than just a label often, but at least it gives you a starting point.
I agree totally. And you know the game of life? I'm just
Yes.
picturing that and like if you really think about all of the things that you've worked through and realized every moment that you are introspective, every time that I've allowed myself to ask myself a question, it's just little steps to eventually make it through the whole game. And I love
Yeah.
that you said too, none of it's permanent. The reason why I've done all this therapy and have worked through so much is because none of it has to weigh me down anymore. It has never been a part of my identity. But if I never worked through it, then it is my whole identity.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of the work, I want to get into that because so much of therapy that you've been talking about right now, you've alluded to some of the things you've had to do
Yeah.
to help it benefit you or actually see it manifest in your life, right? So, what is the
Hmm.
real work in therapy?
The real work is actually practicing anything outside of the 50 minutes you have with your therapist.
Okay. So, what does that look like? Give me an example.
Yeah, one thing I really struggle with see, I'm already anxious talking about it. I do this thing where I split my hair ends very compulsively. Never thought it was anything but a bad habit. I see a lot of people
Right.
do it. People joke about split ends in movies. And ever since I was younger, I would take my hair like this and I could sit in the bathroom for 4 hours straight. And then I would look down. There's a huge pile of broken hair. And it was very addictive. I didn't want to stop doing it. It's something about a texture as well. You all know, do you ever have like a coarse hair, Danny?
Yeah, I do.
Like
Yeah.
it feels different and I have a very like sensory texture thing to it. And it's very it puts you in a trance like state to fixate on a split end, split it and move on to finding the next one. It's like a little
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
And when your family's got some issues and stuff, you're super smart as a kid and find out ways to play with
Right, right.
yeah.
And so you've obviously spoken with your therapist about this.
Mhm.
They have given you the work to do, which is
Mhm. When I'm sitting and get really lost in the hair, truly what I try to say to myself is you can put it down. Like I know you can because in that moment I'm playing with my hair and I'm pulling another one and another one and my whole mindset is I have to keep going. And I say put it down, look up, and just this week I've practiced looking in the mirror and looking at my eyes. Cuz
so just to break
yes,
the trance like state
yes,
that you're in.
because I was so dissociating from the real world and so I will truly just I have to put it down and because it's so hard to do, I'll put my hair in a ponytail. Yeah, and I'll go to a mirror, look at my eyes, and look up and be like, let's try to just do something else. So that's some of the work that's real work, that's in real time. Because in therapy, you'll talk about a lot of therapy is you start just kind of complaining a bit in a way where it's like, oh, I wish I could stop, but I can't. It's so hard. I want
Hmm.
to, but I can't. I can't. And you analyze it a lot. Well, not you, I do, because I'm
Hmm.
afraid of actually changing.
Right. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. It's easier to just talk and talk and talk about something and to
Exactly.
actually commit to changing it or working on fixing it is like a completely different thing.
Yep. That's 100% it.
So that's a really great example. And I know that there's so many things you've worked through with your therapist, but do you actually find that you practice what you preach in some ways? Like, are you, is it becoming more normal for you to take what you're learning in therapy and apply it into your life? Because I think that that's the big thing that a lot of people really struggle with. And not to say that staying in therapy is bad, but it's like, how do you ever progress if you're not taking what you're learning and practicing it in real life?
A big part of therapy is getting over the fact that you kind of at one point might get addicted to it, because it was the first person I had ever met who really was asking me stuff,
Yeah.
who could also listen, who could understand it, who would push my boundaries to actually discover more and more of what I really feel and really think, besides a lot of my defenses. So I remember there was a time when my therapist, she said to me, I love our sessions. I just want to know, I'm noticing that you are maybe idolizing me a little bit, and I just wanted to bring that up because I just want to make us both notice that, because it could inhibit you a bit.
Is
And
this
I
your
was
current
scared.
therapist now or a
Yes,
therapist you've had?
I'm still seeing her.
Interesting. And
Yes.
wow, how proud am I of you that you didn't just fire her and like
I know.
move on to somebody else immediately. But you're not alone in this, Kelly, because actually you poll your audience a lot and you look for them to give you their feedback about certain things. And you had somebody write in that said that they don't have many friends and that they kind of depend on their therapist to be like a friend. They've been with them for 8 years. And this
Yeah.
therapist actually had to set boundaries of being like, I'm your therapist and I'm here for you, but I'm not a friend. Those are two different relationships.
Yeah. That really hit me hard in the face, because I think a lot of us feel so connected. I felt so like we're the same person, and I
Yeah.
have seen my therapist too. She has admitted, because after years we got really close in very good ways of a therapist
Yeah. Yeah,
boundaries.
of course.
And maybe at one of our year anniversaries, not that we know when it is, but after a long, long time, she said, I have not really said this much because in the beginning, I think you identified with me too much. But she said to me, I do have to say, it is wild how we have been paired as a therapist and a client, because I really have experienced so much of what you had. But she couldn't tell me that till later on, you
Of
know?
course, yeah. And how validating for you to be like, I'm not just crazy. I knew we were
Yeah.
connected beyond
Yes.
just this relationship of you helping me work through all of these things. There was actually something deeper there where they could resonate and relate to what you were going through.
Yeah. And after you get over the fact that you notice you're so codependent on the therapy and your
Right.
therapist, that's when, at least for me, I would say that. A lot of us might not speak from a stream of consciousness even when we go to therapy. My biggest win in therapy was starting to be completely transparent about the fact that I couldn't stop smoking weed, that
Mm,
I always wanted to text guys that I didn't really want to talk to, that I was actually angry with her, that I actually didn't like something she said. Like, we just have to also speak what we actually think. They want that. A
yeah.
therapist doesn't care at all. They are
Right.
not going to be offended. I mean, unless you attack them, but
Yeah.
they
But
want
even
to
then,
know
I
the
think they
realness.
they they understand like you're going through a healing process, and
Yeah.
for them, I think it's probably a great breakthrough when somebody like you who's so codependent and
Mhm.
so worried about turning people away from you to speak your mind and to be honest and vulnerable instead of just saying what you think they want to hear.
It makes your sessions so much better for you, because if you go in like I used to with a little notepad of, look at everything I accomplished last week, she said to me, you come here like you're going to school.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
do that.
I've had that relationship with a therapist where I wanted them to see that I was not scared or anxious anymore, even though I
Mhm.
was. So I would downplay some of the things I was experiencing to be like, yeah, this probably would have made me anxious like a month ago, but I'm working through it now and I'm in a better place. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, but like, how are you actually feeling about it? And I'd be like, well, I'm fine again. Like, I'm good. And they'd be like, so why are you
Oh.
calling me if you're fine? Like, why are you calling me about this thing then? Right? You're like, oh, got me.
That statement of, but it's okay. I mean, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Oh, does that not just follow every serious statement? Or like, it's like when you send a text and you're like, I'm dying, LOL.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. Exactly the same thing. And I had this experience with a therapist where it was relating really to my dreams. A lot of my anxiety was manifesting in my sleep, which is
Oh,
the
yeah.
worst because you can't even control it. Like you're asleep and you're like, I can't like stop my brain from playing out these scenarios in my dreams.
Yeah.
Just awful. And so I remember him kind of asking me and being like, well, how do you unwind before bed? Like, what is the routine that's getting you to this place? And I was like, well, my routine's fine. I mean, I was smoking weed at the time as well.
Mhm.
I watch a bit of TV and then I just go to sleep. And he was like, okay, but like, what are you thinking about before you go to bed? Like, are you thinking about your to do list? Are you thinking about these circumstances? And what he was really trying to get at is that part of the reason that I was going through this and it was manifesting in my dreams was because I wasn't allowing myself to admit that it was affecting me during the day. Like I was just pretending that I would literally pretend like I was surprised. Like I really don't know why I'm dreaming about this because this doesn't affect me during the day at all. Meanwhile, at night, as I'm smoking a joint and getting into my headspace, my brain is just wandering about all these things giving me anxiety. But like, you don't want to say that, right? You want to just be like, this is, I don't know how this is happening to me. It's just really coming out of left field.
Dani, the level of effort that you put into staying unconscious. Oh, thank
Yes.
you for validating my entire existence. The entire reason that I go to therapy is because my automatic is numb out, my automatic is dissociate, even when I can feel like I'm feeling a lot of stuff. That's the
Right.
biggest confusion we have is we are so affected by your feelings and thoughts, so we believe that we're processing them, but my skill in not processing everything is so high grade.
Right. I think that you said it exactly right. I truly believed that the anxiety that I was experiencing was me working through it, when in reality,
Yeah.
it was just the manifestation of like physically being unable to handle it anymore. And I was like, no, I'm working through this. And it wasn't until I had actually sought out help for it to realize that I had no coping mechanisms besides substance abuse,
Right.
besides downplaying it, besides spiraling, just pretending it didn't exist, which isn't a coping mechanism at all.
That is the
Fascinating.
it is, and the utility of therapy for me is just that. Always is I don't think I have the skill fully to always be able to check in.
Yeah.
It's really a place where I go to check in, and I don't still feel comfortable with only talking to myself about my feelings because feelings are overwhelming for me. I
Yeah.
know I'm feeling them. I know I'm going through them. I no longer hate myself for the struggle, but the therapy serves me so well in terms of seeing things for what they are and actually coming up with actionable items to make my week less hell.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I want to know, Kelly, you're still in therapy.
Hell
Why are you
yeah.
still in therapy?
Since I was going through a lot of the healing from a breakup where I learned so much about my family dynamics, I realized the one thing I never felt brave enough to do was actually set some boundaries with family. And we have an episode that's going to be all about this. I'm going to go into super deep detail and we'll be talking to a therapist. Okay. So wait for that. But that's mainly all the work I've been doing even till this year. I never thought I could do that. And it was terrifying and scary. And it was also a really good way to practice not being super dependent on therapy by no longer having my family base for a while because I needed to take time away and not really talk to them and heal through stuff. You can't heal through stuff if you don't take time away from it.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that healing in the thick of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was really good practice for me to truly become self sufficient with a lot of my feelings.
Yeah.
I had to build a connection with myself. I had to talk to myself. I had to let myself cry with myself and talk myself down, push myself up. That was the best thing that I did with the help of therapy. So, therapy helped me do it in real life. You only
Yeah.
have therapy for 50 minutes a week. For all the other days, I could truly practice doing that every single day.
I love that.
Yeah.
Would you ever stop going? I feel like I know the answer, but I want to hear you say it.
Definitely not. Not because I'm afraid of what would happen. It's like I don't want to lose the ability to continue growing and healing in such cool ways, discovering more about myself. And it's not even just digging into the past. The therapy helps me think about my future. For example, my therapist has really helped me feel so excited to apply to school again soon and start
Yeah.
grad school to become a therapist. A lot of these things, we're not just talking about feelings all the time. We think about your life goals, where you want to be, what you're doing every day. Like, oh, are you going to go for a walk? There's so many cool things you talk about and fun things and paths that you build together. And I'm definitely going to have a therapist while I'm a therapist. You're not allowed to not.
I love that you share that therapy isn't just for the trauma in your life, it's
No.
for the future, it's for your dreams,
Yeah,
your aspirations, your goal setting.
it
I
is.
think that is something that we do not talk about enough in therapy is all of the other benefits besides just working through your shit.
Yes, it's so cool to think about all the different types of phases you're just going to have in your life. And it gets so much richer if you look at yourself, connect with yourself, and truly believe in all the places you can go. And I think, sorry, everyone, but if you don't go a little bit back to dig, you can't have all the data to push you forward. And the next segment of our show that we're going to do in every episode is called Vent Here. Now, this is the part of the show where we listen to what actually Dani typically reads, little responses that you all have sent to me because you all know how much I love asking on Instagram, the little question box, or through our Patreon. We ask for you to submit stuff, or just if you DM me something that's super interesting, we like to respond and react to them. And for guests, we'll have this segment as kind of asking them anything, but this is typically where we hear from you. Go ahead, Dani. This is where we asked you all, why did you start going to therapy?
Yeah, so there was some really interesting answers here. This first one I wanted to bring up because I feel like you could maybe relate to this in some ways. This person says, my mom forced me to go for my anorexia and eating disorder, and it was the best thing she ever did. Now, I know your mom didn't force
Whoa.
you, but you started acknowledging or recognizing an eating disorder very young, correct?
No, 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 no. I love this. And I can understand that it would probably be so offensive that your mom would want to help you in that moment, right? Because your eating disorder is your thing. It's like, you're trying to
Yeah.
rip this away from me. What's wrong with you? I am so proud that you probably had no choice, but you ended up going and it was, like you said, the best thing ever. I wish, oh, my parents, growing up Asian and we didn't understand anything about feelings or eating disorders or anything. Even when I started pursuing therapy in college, we also couldn't afford it. So they really didn't really want me to go at all. They're very supportive and loving. They
Mm.
wanted me to be okay, but they didn't understand.
So, knowing because your eating disorder manifested for you at quite a young age, right? Like, when would you say it first kind of started?
10.
Yeah. So, how would you have benefited at 10, despite the obvious? Like, obviously, therapy is helpful, but
Mhm.
looking back at you at 10 years old, what would have been the game changer for you with therapy?
Oh, I would have had someone just tell me what's up. I had no clue. I had no idea until I was probably 16 of even what that was. Until I could ever
Wow.
look it up on internet. We didn't even really have internet until we were 14. I'm 28, Dani. We're the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
age and I truly felt so lost. And that's why a lot of us, even with the information, we feel like we're so messed up because everything's our fault and the problem is ours. So if someone had just told
Yeah.
me, oh, yeah, no, I know that. A lot of people do that. It's okay. Like, I get it. And my mind would have exploded.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's I love all of these answers coming in because they're just wildly different.
Yeah.
This one comes in and says, I started going to therapy because of suicide ideation at first, and then I realized I had trouble navigating relationships. So this to me was just
Oh,
I feel like so many of us when we start therapy go in because of a particular problem
yeah. We
and
really
then it
do.
evolves into so much more. understanding about what we actually need to work through as well, right?
I
There's like a problem and then there's the causation.
Yeah, I really like that too because the first words are scary for some people, but I have a lot of friends where it's become so normalized for them to maybe mention it, and it's not such a wild thing. It just basically means like a lot of times I feel so exhausted by life, don't want to be here anymore. It just gives you a
Yeah,
nice language for it, and I've been there,
I've been there.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
even we minimize teenage angst to the words teenage angst. Like
yeah,
a lot of those years, you feel like, I'm done. I'm
yeah,
done.
yeah. Yeah, mine was definitely more in college where I can remember times where things just felt so heavy that I didn't want to hurt myself,
Yeah.
but I was like, if a bus hit me today, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah. And it's
Like,
real. It's not
it
even a
wasn't like
joke.
active harming myself. It
Yeah.
was like, okay, if I got hit by a bus today, things would just be better. And that we don't talk about that enough, right? We always think about suicide ideation as actively or physically harming ourselves, which for a lot of people it is. But for many of us, it's just the idea of wanting to waste away or just to not wake up in the morning.
It's the dream of relief from the existence that's too much, too
Yeah.
heavy, not fun. What's the point? And I feel
Yeah.
that. Oh, thank you for sharing that, everyone. Whoa.
I think this one is something that a lot of people start therapy for. This person says, I started therapy because I was going through so much grief after my mom passed away suddenly at 54. So I can't even imagine what this person was going through if they had their parents suddenly pass away. But I know for many people who experience unexpected grief, therapy is the first thing that they do. And it's wild because for many of us, it takes a breaking point so serious as grief to be able to take those steps, right?
Right. And I think that's super brave because sometimes when you're so broken, you shut down completely. I
Yeah.
think that's so cool. And it does, make sure that we remember what you said is it's good to have something prompt you, period.
Yeah.
And we don't
Totally.
need to wait till it's something that's really devastating either. But man, my heart goes out to you.
This one, I think, is kind of fascinating as well. They say, similar to the last one, originally I went because of my parents' divorce, but I started going later again in life because of perfectionism and my eating disorder.
Wow.
I think that there's a lot of people who jump in and out of therapy, right?
Yeah.
It starts with something sometimes in your childhood, right? I knew a lot of people that I went to school with who were their parents were going through divorces, and their parents kind of coaxed them into therapy. Like, we want you to be able to survive this, so we're going to send you to therapy. And I didn't experience that, and I always thought, oh my gosh, that's so crazy that your parents are getting divorced and you're going to therapy at like 12 years old.
I know, because
But I almost
when we were growing up, it was still so stigmatized. And I remember looking at
yes.
anyone who mentioned therapy, I judged them so much because I'd never known anyone who did it.
Right. It just was like,
Not even judge. I just was like, oh, what's that?
I always thought it was for really rich people
Yeah,
or it was for people that had really messed up home lives. Like, those were
correct.
the two things in my head that I only equated therapy to as a child or an adolescent, I guess. But what I actually find really interesting is the few people I do know that had parents going through divorces that went through therapy were much quicker to go through therapy as adults. Like, they were more perhaps open minded or more exposed to it. So, like, starting therapy as adults probably was easier for them.
I think one of the things that I saw in that what that person said was it makes so much sense, right, to struggle with an eating disorder and perfectionism if your family went through a big break like that. Because I
Hmm.
can assume I'm not assuming, but so much of my struggles came from having a broken family, but they didn't end up, doing the formality or putting me in therapy, which kind of envious of this person's experience. In a way,
Right.
I'm kind of envious because we have the
Yeah.
same struggles, yet they kind of thought about you a little bit.
But just remember, a lot of those
I
parents do that because they're like, oh, I fucked up my kids so bad and I feel guilty. So I guess I'll pay this therapist $100 an hour to fix my kids. Like, a lot of the people that I knew, unfortunately, their parents were really absent and they kind of treated therapy as like the alternative to actually stepping in and dealing with their kids in those
totally.
situations of therapy. So I mean, it's all give and take, right? This one I think is really fascinating as well for you, Kelly. Past relationship trauma resurfacing. And I had to realize that I was hurting to be able to heal. Did you send that one in?
I think so. Who is in my diary? I don't even have a diary because I don't write down my feelings because I'm too scared. Um, I've been going through that exactly. I mean, it couldn't be more right now. It just happened. Not that it ever ends, but specifically in the last 2 months, I've been reliving a lot of the sadness and missing someone, and not even missing them, just the process of letting go of a relationship that ended can take quite a long time because it was weaved into the fabric of who I am.
Yeah.
And a big thing that's hard is when you see people who are such a big part of your life completely moving on, and you are doing a lot of this healing and therapy, but you're alone. And that
Yeah.
pisses me off so much because
Right. You're
I'm,
like, how can you love someone else when I'm still in the thick of working through
and
this?
it's also just like, you're the problem.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I'm not saying I was also very toxic, but I relate to this so much because therapy makes you notice stuff. Just like what you said earlier, Danny, is you don't think that these things affect you in daily life earlier in the day, not just when you're laying in your bed at night and you feel a tear
Yeah.
coming. You're like, pretty sure that's not the only time this has been bothering me, but okay.
No, right. But we can bury it so much better during the day when we're awake.
Yes.
This one I really instantly thought of you, and we talked
God, why
about
do
this a bit
all these make
earlier.
you think of me?
Because
I
you're
know.
so honest about your experiences with therapy. So I think it's just like, I love that you can share these things and other people can relate to
Mm.
them and vice versa. This person says, I was in a low point in my career as a social worker and I realized I needed better coping mechanisms. And I love this because I think there are so many people in our careers we don't recognize. You don't even have to be in a frontline position or in a position that you're really helping people, though I think those people definitely have the brunt of it. Just day-to-day career shit that like weighs
Mhm.
on you and really affects your ability to manage your life. And we don't ever think of going to therapy because of work.
Yeah,
Like we think that that's
Danny.
not a good enough reason.
Danny, that's why you started going to therapy, right?
Yeah,
Work.
it was past work trauma, honestly. It wasn't the work I was doing at the time.
Oh.
It was an experience I had had with really, really terrible bosses that had really left an imprint on my life, combined with quitting my job and starting a new business that I felt very inadequate. So I was dealing with the anxiety from past work trauma combined with the anxiety of imposter syndrome and
Ooh, can't believe I
being
haven't brought
worried.
that up yet.
Not yet. But, I think it was work related, but it was so much more rooted in my failure, my anxiety of failure and
Mhm.
my anxiety of giving myself a chance to be successful. I didn't want to succeed because I was worried about the attention that it would place on me. I was worried that I wasn't good enough to receive success
Yeah.
almost or achieve success. And so my experience, yes, it was work related, but I think it was so much more to do with my past and things that I hadn't dealt with in my own anxiety. I think this person, what they're writing in about is the day to day of work trauma or the stress that you take on from your job really affects you. And I don't think that we think it's just like a byproduct of having a job when it's not. Like it shouldn't be.
There are so many things because we're so used to it, like that daily work stress, the grind, the anxiety, the having to go all these meetings and secretly hating it. We bury so much of that because in our minds, it's like, well, we have to do it, which then translates to, I don't want to talk about it because I'm going to have to do it anyway. I'm not going to be able to change it. I'm not going to be able to fix it. So why discuss it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly why you want to talk about it so you can survive it in a way that's easier for you.
Yeah. And for me, I was so scared that if I told my therapist all of the anxiety I was feeling around starting a business, that he was going to be like, well, you shouldn't start a business then. Like, I really thought that was going to be his suggestion to me. And so I was super nervous about that and didn't want to hear that, if that makes sense. Like I didn't want to hear him say, well, if you're really feeling this anxious about it, you probably shouldn't do it. He was never going to say that, but that was my fear of talking to him about it.
Oh, you just smacked me face jab. I don't even know how to describe that because I feel it so much. The fear of bringing something up for me means great. They're gonna make me wanna. They're gonna want me to work on that. They're gonna want me to
To
change.
change something.
Yeah, change the way I'm doing it because there is a fear of they're gonna take it away from me. They're gonna want me to be different. It's gonna seem like my fault. But the
Yeah.
hardest pill to swallow in life is also sometimes things that aren't working aren't working.
Yes, so true. So true. But here we both are, Kelly, still doing what we're doing. So maybe a few things are working. I want to finish out this session with this session as if we're in a therapy
I know.
session.
I love it. Keep
Wow.
going. That fits
The
so
little
well.
slip there. I'm going to finish out this session with this last one that says, I started therapy when I was 9 years old, over 20 years ago, because of my chronic illnesses, but I still go today and I love therapy.
Wait, I can't believe I didn't mention this. Thank you for saying that because it took me 5 years of therapy to ever bring up my health stuff. I mean, you all know if you've been following me for a long time, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, or I don't know how you found me, but I have severe constipation and IBS and digestive issues that wreak havoc on my mental health and my sense of self and every part of my daily life. And just like with the job stuff, I felt there's no point in talking about it. Like I can talk, I come to therapy for my feelings. I come to therapy to talk
Yes.
about ex-boyfriends. I come to therapy to talk about my dad and my mom and my sister. Why would I ever talk about my poop or lack thereof?
Right. Or lack thereof.
uh, that was my biggest breakthrough. I can't believe I didn't bring this up. Biggest breakthrough of therapy in the last year is talking to her about all those things that I thought were yucky and unchangeable, but just having someone hear how the constant struggle and stress of anything going on with me, it truly runs my life. And if you're hiding that from yourself, from someone else, not letting yourself express it to someone else, it's I didn't know that it was affecting me that much. And I love that that's the way this person kind of got in the door of therapy. And they probably were like, ooh, I like this room. Let's stay here.
Right. Oh, I'm so proud of you that you can share that it's not just about couples therapy for you. It's not just about your codependency or the eating disorder recovery or even the chronic illnesses, right? Like it, we are human, we're multifaceted. We come with a boatload of problems that guess what? You get to fix.
Yes. And you get to feel it. And even if you feel like you can't fix something, you can find your way to make your life so much better. And I'm so excited for this Therapy Thursday podcast, everyone. This has been a dream for me to do for so long. I was so scared. I was so intimidated. I really wasn't sure if I was going to make this happen, but it's here. And I cannot wait for you to enjoy every single episode. We're going to touch on anything and everything I've pretty much ever talked about. We will have therapists. We will have some of my fellow friends from social media. We will talk about all the things that often when I was younger, I was so afraid to feel and heal through. And I can't wait to go through and grow through so much with all of you. Can't wait for you to listen to the next episode. Please rate and review us on iTunes. I believe that's what it is, right, Dani? Apple Podcasts.
We have Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcasts.